It's Cardboard Time, episode number 67, and I'm your host, Arwen Kathke. On today's episode, reviews of Mountains Out of Molehills, Final Girl, Carnage at the Carnival, and Tall Tales, with an interview on the back end of the show with Nathan Thornton that we recorded live from Origins Game Fair. And it's always such an amazing time talking with Nathan, so I'm very excited to share that with you, share his insights, and share some of the very interesting things that we discussed while we were at Origins. And speaking of a discussion, let's discuss the Shelf of Shame update for this episode 152, which is down by 2 since the last time that we talked. 3 new games that were acquired. All of them were either crowdfunds or pre-orders. The first of which is Overboss Duel. This is a heads-up version of Overboss by Brotherwise, and let me tell you, I am so intrigued by this game. I absolutely love Overboss, and very interested to dive into this one. Tall Tales was another game that came in that was a crowdfunding game, and we will be talking about this on the later half of the episode. And then Sagrada Artisans is the last game that I got in. This game I'm very intrigued by because I have color vision issues with Sagrada. It's a game that sits down in my basement. I've played it, but I do have a hard time getting it to the table because of the color vision issues that I do have. And I'm very intrigued to see what they've done to mitigate those through this. Supposedly that's fixed. We're going to see. And this is also a campaign/legacy style game. And I'm very intrigued to see what they've done with those elements as well. And then on to the games that I actually played. They were 5. 9 Lives is the first one. This is a trick-taking game that I picked up at Origins from Allplay. And very intriguing. I do want to review it at some point, but I do want to play it some more because I didn't quite rock the strategy and really figured it out quite yet. Tall Tales is obviously one if we're going to talk about. I did get that to the table. Too Many Bones Undertow. I had a fantastic time with this one. Playing with Jordan, introducing Jordan to the Too Many Bones universe. Really enjoyed Undertow. First victory for Too Many Bones, so I'm super thrilled with that. And looking forward to getting some more Too Many Bones content out to the table, especially after getting Undertow out. I'm really intrigued to see more content and get some more of that gigantic box I have downstairs out to the table and explore everything. And then finally, Mountains Out of Molehills and Tapple were both review copies that were sent over from the op. I did get a chance to play both of those at a recent game night. And I do want to also talk about Mountains Out of Molehills in this episode. Really intriguing game. I do have a lot to say about it. Tapple, I do want to do a review of it, but I was very surprised by that game as well. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Mountains Out of Molehills while we're discussing the subject. And this one's from 2022, from 2 to 4 players, plays in 45 to 60 minutes, designed by Jim DiCamillo and Patrick Marino, and art by Elena Munoz. And this was published by the op. Moles have traveled from all over to compete in the annual Mountain Maker tournament. In this light strategy game, competitors show their skill based on how high they can pile their molehills and by how many mountains they control. The mole that can build and control the most mountains out of molehills over 6 rounds will be declared the top tunneler and win the game. This does feature a 2-level game board and full-color acrylic standees for each mole. So Mountains Out of Molehills is played over 6 rounds. Each round has 4 phases. In the first phase, players are going to take turns drafting action cards from a face-up market to form a hand of 4 cards. These actions will move the moles underground on this bottom board while adding molehill pieces to the bottom of the mountains above them on the top board. In Phase 2, each player simultaneously determines the order that they plan to resolve their action cards. They place these cards face down in a stack from first action to last. Once the order is set, you can't change it. So you have to very, very carefully plan. And that careful planning will help ensure that you take control over the most valuable molehills. But you do have to be careful, as your opponents may block your path, throw a rock in your way, or even cause those biggest mountains to topple over, spilling the pieces onto other mountains. During Phase 3, players will take turns revealing the top card from their stack and resolving its action. In Phase 4, players are going to score the round. Each player controls the mountains that have their color molehill on the bottom, and they earn 1 point for each piece in the mountains that they control. After scoring, players draft the turn order for the next round, starting with the player who has the most pieces on top of each mountain. And the player who goes first gets first choice when drafting cards, but the player who acts last gets the final movement of the round. After 6 rounds, players total up all their points from the 6 rounds, and the player with the most points is dubbed the top tunneler and wins the game. So again, this was a review copy of the game, and thanks to the app for providing it. At its core, this is a fun, very chaotic programming game. I do have quite a few programming games. Some of them have left my collection. Some of them have stayed. Robo Rally, it's not the most recent iteration of it, but I think it was the one previous. I have heard that there are better iterations of it, but it just didn't hit for me, and that left the collection. But a game like Mechs vs. Minions, I had a fantastic time with. And you will hear what happened to this in my collection at the end of the review. But I did like the fact that you can see kind of roughly what your opponents are going to do through the draft mechanic. So you can see what cards your opponents are going to take. That does eliminate some of the randomness that is kind of inherent to the nature of the game through programming and your opponent's actions. That said, there is a bit more randomness that is interjected through the rock mechanic. So basically, you're programming your moves, you're moving around on this bottom board, and you may eventually run into this rock. You have a die that's on top of the rock, and you have to follow whatever that die says, either turn left, turn right, or make a complete U-turn. So that is something that can get in the way of your plans. It's a little bit more randomness, but it's randomness that's controlled by the players. The argument can be made for that you didn't choose to pick up the card. You could have chosen to do that, and you could have moved that rock somewhere and made sure that it wasn't in your way, and made sure that it was in an opponent's way. So this can be a little bit mean. It can be a little bit of take that. But I didn't find that it was super, super intensely mean. It was just something that, kind of messed up people's plans. They were still able, for the most part, to put pieces down, that kind of thing. So an example of this, Allie was playing with us along with Jordan. She misplayed her hand, she moved the rock, and she basically kept bumping and U-turning into it. So she would bump into the rock, which the die face had a U-turn on it. Then she would play a U-turn card, because that was in her programming stack. And then she would bump into the rock again and continue to just hit it back and forth. And we were darn near rolling on the floor laughing over this. I do have a video. I will probably post it once this podcast goes up. But it's going to lead to those kind of moments where people are going to be getting in others' ways and things like that. So that's kind of what you need to expect going into this. We didn't get the chance to really fully enjoy a large chain of toppling mountains. So if you have a mountain that topples because it's a certain height, and that height does get bigger as the rounds go on. But basically, if you go in and you build your mountain a little bit too high, it will topple over. And then those pieces will go onto other mountains, which can then cause them to topple as well. So we really did want to see what we could do with that mechanic, and we didn't get to see really the full advantage of that. Every time we were able to topple, it was kind of going and benefiting somebody else for the most part. So we would like to see, maybe playing this a couple more times, we would be able to get to see that really satisfying chain of toppling mountains that really affected the score quite a bit. But as far as production value, we love the acrylic standees. They were great. We love the use of the box for the bottom movement platform. And they were very nice, chunky pieces for the Molehills. So really, really good production, really good use of the box, and a very nice insert as well. So very good on the production value side of things. Color vision, I think the moles may have been matched a little bit better to the Molehill pieces, but once the colors were chosen, it was very easy to discern them. You do want to play this in plenty of light. It is a little bit difficult to see that bottom level without it. So make sure you have plenty of light. Make sure you have a light source that's going to get into that bottom, or else you may have a little bit difficult time seeing those pieces and seeing exactly where they are, how many spaces you can move, etc. It does kind of fit because it's an underground environment, but at the same time, you do want to be able to see those spaces. So for my final thoughts, this was definitely one of the more random games. You do have some control over the programming. I did have some plans during the game that I was able to execute and execute well. But especially in the 3 and 4 player game, it's really, you do get in each other's ways quite a bit, and best laid plans essentially. But it does get crowded. You do bump into people, and that is part of the fun. This is not going to be for people who want just a purely strategic game that they are able to stay in their own lane. They don't have to interact with anybody. You are going to have your plans foiled regularly, but it's just the matter of trying to make the best plan that you possibly can and mitigate that risk as much as you can. So we had a great time with it. Great table presence. We're still telling the story of Allie just constantly bumping into that rock. And this one's going to stick around on the shelves because of that. So if you're looking for one of those games that has a great table presence, that you can get people in, it's actually a really fun way of introducing people to that programming concept without a lot of rules overhead. And that was very fun. Mountains Out of Molehills. And the next game I want to talk about is Final Girl Carnage at the Carnival. This is from 2021. This is a one-player game from 20 to 60 minutes, designed by Evan Derrick and AJ Porfirio. The artist was Vladislava Ladkova and published by Van Ryder Games. Carnage at the Carnival, Geppetto wanted a family of his own. Using inspiration from his favorite stories and with the help of dark rituals, he decided to make his own. The circus is just a front to find more, quote, new additions to the family. So thanks to Van Ryder for the review copy of this. This was an expansion to Final Girl, so you do have to have the core game of Final Girl to play this, but it's another scenario where you're going to get another baddie, you're going to get another couple of girls to have survived these scenarios, and then you're going to have another location as well. So this added a main new mechanic in the puppets that Geppetto utilized, and then the traps that were found in the carnival. If you do want my thoughts on Final Girl and my overall thoughts, my first impressions, go to episode 52. You can hear all about it there. I'm just going to talk about the new components that this brings in. So first, I do want to talk about Geppetto. There was a little bit more to keep track of than Hans, but nothing too terribly egregious. It was just a couple of things, a little added layer of complexity. It did force me to think in a different way to beat him. Strategically, it was a very, very different fight, but it still also very much came down to the end. It was very tense. It was very suspenseful. The starting event was one of the survivors actually turned into a werewolf and did damage to whatever was in its space in a certain order. So most of the time it was going after survivors. But it just so happens that Geppetto was in its space one of those times and actually did damage to Geppetto, which I really needed to launch my final assault. Big swing with a huge hit at the end. I did have a golf cart around the perimeter of the carnival that I was going to set as a backup plan if I needed it, that I was going to be able to take the golf cart from one place to another and just run them over and do damage. But fortunately, I didn't need that. But in the end, Geppetto did perish. So looking forward to trying this one again, this fight with Geppetto. I would like to see more of Geppetto's cards. I thought that the puppets were super interesting and they could be spread out. They could kind of conglomerate on you and basically focus on you, where they'd all just descend on your location and then do a bunch of damage. So you can see these things happening in your head. And I do want to kind of put that out to people. As you're thinking about this, you can see these scenarios just playing out, and you can imagine it actually going on, which is such a cool thing to have from a board game. The traps added a nice twist. The layout of the board of the carnival was pretty interesting. The traps added a little bit of flavor. You shuffled them into the items that you would pick up, rather. And that kind of discouraged haphazard searching. So instead of going to one place and searching a whole bunch, you knew that you were going to run into something if you did that. One of the traps did a number on me. It took out the first two survivors I was trying to rescue, and it really just amped up that intensity right at the beginning of the game, which was very, very interesting and added a lot of tension to that. But as far as my final thoughts on this go, I am continuously amazed at how often I walk away from this game with a story about how I was or wasn't able to take down the killer. This has become my new favorite killer. As far as location, I'm kind of even between the two that I've played, between the carnival and the camp. I think I might give a little bit more to the carnival now that I played a little bit more. It does have a little bit more going on to it. But I'm excited to take on Frightmare at Maple Lane next. This one I picked up on my own, and very excited to get that to the table the next time that I've got that Jones in to play some Final Girl. So that was Final Girl Carnage at the Carnival. And the last game that I did want to talk about from 2023 is Tall Tales. This is from 3 to 4 players, plays in 30 to 45 minutes, designed by Rand, the art is by Rand, and published by New Mill Industries. We are social creatures, natural storytellers. It's how we retain memories of life's important events and share them with our community. Of course, some of these stories become larger than life, taking on a mythic status as details grow and embellishments are added. We give these obviously outsized stories a name, Tall Tales. In the trick-taking card game Tall Tales, players begin with modest card values in their hands that represent young stories before their repetition. Over the course of several rounds, hands will be sculpted to contain more valuable cards representing the story's growth over time. Whoever has the highest card values at the scoring round and the end of the game has won as the best storyteller with the greatest tall tale. So this was one that I picked up from a crowdfunding campaign. I heard a lot of community chat about it and discussion, and I decided to pick this one up. And I know what you're saying, Arwen, another trick taker, right? How many of these can you do? This does, again, manage to do something very different with how the cards are drafted for the next round. And basically how that works is you're going to basically follow the standard trick-taking tropes. There's no trump card or anything like that. But what's going to happen is the winner gets their choice of the cards in the, quote, memory market, which are the cards that were played during the previous round. The lowest player gets to take cards from the embellishment market, which are pretty much the highest value cards. So it's very interesting. It is something I do recommend if you're interested in this game. Go take a look at a table setup, because you're going to have this memory market, which are the cards that you've played in the previous round. You have the cards that you play in the current round, and then you have this embellishment market that is going to be kind of your higher cards that are going to you're going to pick up if you do have the lowest value. So cards are scored at the end of the second and fourth rounds. So what normally happened was that we were trying to win the first and third rounds, and that way you could kind of bomb out on the second and fourth rounds to really have access to the embellishment market, and that way you would pick up those cards for scoring. I picked up on this very, very early, but I played this with Matt and Lori, and they didn't pick up on it quite as early as I did, and I did have a significant advantage at the end of the game with my score. I think I won by like about 30 points or so. So as soon as you realize that, like, your strategy is pretty clear. I need to win early so that I can lose in the second round, get those points so I can score, and then really try to bomb out the fourth round so I can pick up a lot of those cards that are going to be in that embellishment market. So I'm not sure about the longevity of this game because of that. I love the mechanic, but as far as, the mystery, the strategy, the figuring out of the game, I don't necessarily know if there's a huge amount to figure out that's left. But I will talk about that in my final thoughts. That said, I absolutely love the artwork in this. It's very quirky. It has kind of almost a childlike quality to it, because it's a tail, because that tail is getting more impressive, and the artwork actually changes and progresses to be a more impressive tail. So, for instance, there's a suit that's a gun. It starts very early on with just a little kid with a pop cap gun. And I wanted to say, like, by the end of it, the person, the big cowboy was riding something like either a whale or a tornado or something like that, with a big gun and that. And it was really cool to see that artwork progress. It was something that I really, really appreciated. This also probably has the best instruction manual tie-in thematically, especially in a trick-taking game. And really how the instruction manual ties each step into its thematic significance. So you're able to tell players, hey, you're going to do this. It's because of this. So, we're going to, the person who, is the highest is going to take this card. And that's because we're trying to, basically take the most impressive things that we've heard and, remember them so that we can play them the next time we tell a story. And then the person who's taking the embellishment goes, well, we're going to take this embellishment so that we can add a little extra pizzazz onto our story for the next time, so that we have a better story and we're not the lowest story. So from that standpoint, I was very, very impressed with that. And it was very easy to teach everybody at the table because of that. So really enjoyed that. So as far as my final thoughts on this one goes, there's definitely things to like with the very unique way Tall Tales plays, its artwork, and the theme that it brings to the table, especially with that tie-in in the instruction manual. This is going to stick around for the time being. I am liking everything that's going on with it mechanically. I'm just really wondering about the longevity of the game, and whether we've kind of already figured out the predominant strategy, or if there's something that we're not seeing. Maybe there's another added layer to this that we're not quite figuring out quite yet. And I'll be interested to see if that's the case, because I'm definitely getting this out with a couple of different groups pretty soon, and seeing what this brings to the table. But yeah. Again, that's definitely one you're going to want to check out if you're a trick-taking fan, and you have a friend that has it, or you can get something online, one of the online board game services, Tall Tales. And coming up, you're going to want to hear the live chat that I had with Nathan Thornton of Storm Chaser Games, so stay tuned. Welcome back. On today's episode, we have a long overdue interview with my special guest for today. We have been talking for months at this point, like probably a year. We want to welcome Nathan Thornton. Now, you may know him from games like Medium, Green Team Wins, and holding the record for designing the very first game about wallpaper, to our knowledge. Please, everybody, welcome Nathan Thornton to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Arwen. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. You and I started talking kind of online last year, and I think it was because of that old wallpaper that I knew it was a game that you had maybe posted about and talked about, and I just basically was like, hey, thanks so much for like repping the game and for talking about it and for playing it, and we kind of struck up a friendship that way, and so then we were able to meet at Gen Con last year, and it has been great. I know we've talked about this ever since then, so I'm glad to finally be sitting across the table from you.
Well, and same here. The feeling is absolutely mutual, and we're kind of close to each other as far as geography goes. Mm-hmm. So there is that as well. But I do have a question for you. And the very first question that you don't know.
Okay.
The questions in advance.
Not all of the questions.
But not all of them. The very first question is, should pizza be cut in triangles or squares?
That's great. And I know you're referring to one of the questions that's in Green Team Wins. And it is a hotly debated topic. And I don't know if it's a regional thing or not, because I do know, I live in Columbus, Ohio, and you live in northern Ohio, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm up towards the Cleveland area.
Yeah. And we have a lot of like square pizza around here, but I do feel like I do land with the Green Team on this one. And I always say triangles. There's something about that classic cut. You've got the little handle on the end, and it's easy to eat. And I would love to say that I am a proponent of the square cut pizza, but I love a triangle sliced pizza like anybody else.
Well, in the square cuts, you get those little tiny pieces at the edge. There's like the 4 of them that just have a little tiny piece of pizza and a lot of crust.
Oh, right.
Nobody wants those.
Right. Well, I think they call that party cut. I think I've seen.
Yeah.
I've watched. This is nothing I should be admitting. I've watched a lot of YouTube documentaries about different styles of pizza across the United States, and I think that is like a regional. So maybe it doesn't have as much reach as I thought it did. But that party cut, where you could get a pizza and cut it into 8 slices in triangles, or you can get a pizza and cut it into, I'm probably get the math wrong, but you can cut it into like 20 or 30 pieces in squares.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm still team triangle. And Green Team, of course, as always.
Absolutely. That was the correct answer, by the way. So why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
I would be happy to. So my name is Nathan Thornton, which I probably didn't have to repeat, but I've been a huge fan of games my whole life, playing. I grew up with 3 brothers, and so we always played Trivial Pursuit. We always played the Game of Life. We always played, a lot of those classic games. And I always wanted to, to continue that with my friends and with my kids when I had them. And I always did, and I never, and people would always say, they're like, oh, you should design games. And I was like, I can't imagine doing that. I don't do math very well. I figure there's probably a lot of left brain thinking that goes into that I'm not capable of. But then I, a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I had this idea to turn this improv game that people call like mind meld, or like, what were you thinking? I was like, what if you turned that into a game? And so I started to figure out to take this fun thing that I like to do with people on road trips or in line for stuff and turn it into a game. And that ended up being Medium. And so that was the first game that I got published. Initially, I was going to try to take it to Kickstarter and publish it myself, and I'm so grateful I did not have to do that, because again, logistics and shipping things across oceans is at a level of math, again, that I do not have the capacity for. And I always thought it would be just one game. I always thought that that was the only idea that I had, and that would be what it was, and I would move on. But then, it definitely sparked something in me where I started to think in terms of like game creation. Like, could this be a game? Is this something that could be, put on cards and put into a box for people to have laughs with their friends with? And so I've been lucky enough to have a couple more games published since then, and a couple more that are in the works. And it has introduced me to, a broad world of this board game community with folks such as yourself and publishers and other board game media people. And it's really opened my eyes, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
So a lot of people around here, we are live at Origins Game Fair 2023, by the way. I did mention that up top, but a lot of people around the con have been playing Green Team Wins.
Oh, thank you.
I have seen it all over the place. We got a couple games in ourselves. Why do you think it took off so much? To me, it's just got this little flair to it that everybody can come to the table, everybody can play it. It's super easy to explain. But I'd like your take on why you think it kind of just exploded.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, and I don't know if it's exploded, but I have seen a lot of people playing it and getting excited about it. And I don't know. And I think that, I don't know, at a place like this, I mean, there are definitely people who enjoy a lot of the heavy strategic games, and I enjoy some strategic games too. And I think that there are a lot of folks who maybe turn their nose up at those light party games. And I think part of it is because some of them, I think, address sort of our baser elements. I don't want to name any names, but we've certainly all played party games that are about being gross or about being like offensive, and I think that's a big turnoff to a lot of people. It is to me, and I think that and I think for that reason, that whole genre of games is kind of looked down upon, because there isn't it's not something you can feel good about. And so one of the things in developing Green Team Wins was to make it super easy to explain and super easy to pick up. So I mean, you can talk about how to play it in about 20 seconds. And also, I'd like to think that what's on the cards is something that everybody can like feel good about. It's it's something you could play with your parents. It's something you could play with your kids, and I think that it makes you think about, it makes you have an opinion about things you didn't realize that you had an opinion on. Like one of my favorite cards in the game. There's a lot of food-based cards in the game.
There's a shocking amount of food cards in there.
Well, because it's something that I do think that is something that connects us all. We all eat food. We all have opinions on food.
Yeah.
And one is a brownie from the edge or a brownie from the middle. And you might not even think actively like I prefer brownies from the edge versus the middle, but everybody does have that preference. And I think that finding out it's, you like brownies from the middle, there's nothing to hold on to. They don't have the little crusty burnt parts, and or the reverse of that. I think that those moments, those little, lighthearted debates that are really fun about it, that make you think about the world in new ways and make you think about your friends in new ways. And I think that's the other part I'm continuing is that it is a game. This is going to sound way too grand, but like it is a game about empathy. It's a game about trying to understand how other people's minds work. I mean, because you could definitely play Green Team Wins and just put down what your opinion is. I think that triangle pizza is the best. I'm not taking questions at this time. Or you could be like, what do I know about these folks? Do they prefer to lean against the wall or sit on the floor, which is another dumb question from the game. And I think that kind of empathetic, it does make people feel closer. Like, I didn't know you like to sleep on your back versus your stomach or whatever it might be.
I need to know about the brownies now.
You know what's funny? Actually, in the original prototype, that was a question that had 3 choices. It was brownie from the edge, brownie from the middle, and brownie from the corner. But that was one of the few cards that they changed, is that they were like, I don't think anybody sees a distinction between corner and edge. And maybe that's true. But yeah, no, I guess it's probably like the triangle thing. I like the edge because there's a little more variety in your brownie bites, that you get kind of the soft, gooey middle, and you get kind of the cake-like middle part of that, and then you get kind of the crunchy edge that was touching the side of the pan. And so I'm an edge case all the way. You?
I am also an edge case, but that's why I like the corners, because they have the double edge on.
Right.
So you get that little bit of bonus. No, Green Team Wins, we actually wound up playing a prototype at PAX U, I want to say it was 2021.
Probably, yeah.
And we just sat around, and it was hours and hours that we sat around. And I think it was beautiful because of the scalability of it. You could just have everybody kind of pop in, pop out. You pop in for a game real quick, 15 questions, and you could get new people in. And, it just hit us so much. Like, this is awesome. This is going to be a huge hit. And we were right, so.
Well, I think all of these games, Medium and Green Team Wins, and then actually the next 2 that aren't out yet, so no reason to talk about them, but they're all kind of based on just things that I like to do with people anyway. Whether it was my friends waiting in line for a roller coaster at Cedar Point, which is an amusement park here in Ohio, if you're not familiar, or when my kids were a little bit younger, we took a lot of long road trips, and so I would make up little games to play in the car, like making lists of things, or doing that, 3, 2, 1, say a word thing. Doing that in the car, and I think that the best games, or at least the best games that I've made anyway, are ones that take the sort of things you like to do with the people you care about anyway, and put some structure and rules around them to kind of just help you. Because I think the best party games anyway are games that you are focused more on the person across the table from you than you are on your cards or dice or anything in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. That nice interaction and that nice kind of community building. We love to see it. Whatever possessed you to design a game about wallpaper? I need to know.
You're right. And to my knowledge, it is the only game about wallpaper that there is. And so Arwen's referring to a game called That Old Wallpaper, which came out at Gen Con last year from AEG. And, it was a game that started with the mechanics first. I really like this idea of like you're picking a pile of like cards that you want, and if you pick the same pile as someone else, you don't get it. And I think there was a kind of nice interplay with that. And so I was thinking about what the cards could look like, and I like the idea of 2 halves of something coming together on the 4 edges of the cards. And so I was like, what could this be? What could this be? And I was thinking about like when I was a kid, and I would spend the night at my grandma's house kind of a lot. My parents would go out of town or they would have a date or whatever. And me and my brothers would stay at my grandma's house, and I would always have a hard time sleeping there because I was scared because I wasn't in my own bed, and I would lay there awake and I would look at the wallpaper on the walls in my uncle's old room, and that feeling where you're just kind of tracing the patterns with your eyes because you don't have anything to do because cell phones haven't been invented yet. And I just thought about that idea of like looking at that weird old, 70s wallpaper in your grandma's old house. And I thought to myself, is that a shared experience? Does everybody have that memory of that weird old grandma's wallpaper in that room in her house? And I was like, I wonder how universal of a theme this is for a game. And so like the theme of the game is you're trying to remember the pattern in the wallpaper in your grandma's old house. And I thought it was such a fun, a fun idea that everybody could get around. And also, to my knowledge, there are no other games about wallpaper.
So in the kind of preamble to this conversation, where we were getting prepped and ready, we talked about where you spend most of the time in your convention. Mm-hmm. And you do spend a lot of time in the Unpub room. Mm-hmm. There's proto-spiels, stuff like that. And we've heard from multiple designers that those spaces are super important to them. What makes those spaces so incredibly important to the community?
It's invaluable. Medium would not have been published if it was not for the unpublished games room here at Origins. And I think I feel like that so many designers feel like there is this huge barrier of entry to the board game world. And there may be in terms of getting published, but in terms of getting your game made and turned into something that people can play, there's no better resource than a place like Unpub or Proto-Spiel, where there are people who are open and giving with their time and their opinions and their thoughts. And I think it's a really hard thing to get your friends who maybe don't play a ton of board games to play, hey, would you like to play by prototype? It's not all the way figured out yet. It's going to be frustrating. Can you help me get there? And like, not a lot of people's friends are interested in doing that. It's a really big ask of anybody, not emotionally, but just like in terms of energy. And I think that there is such a willingness for people to, I'll play your game. I'll tell you what's bad or frustrating about it. I'll help you try to make it better. And I think that's such a rare commodity that we have, that are like, here's an idea that I had, here's this dream I have of this one day being a thing that people can buy in a box, but it's not there yet. And so having people give their feedback, give their advice, and I'm continually surprised by how supportive and positive people are with their feedback, because there's nothing in the world that's easier to do than to dump on something that doesn't work.
Oh yeah.
And people love to do that stuff. I don't know if you've ever been on a place that I call the internet. Mm-hmm. It's full of people who love to tell you what is wrong with your ideas. And so to have a space where people could be like, yeah, this isn't quite working, but what if it was like this? Or I felt like I had too many options here. What if you reduce the number of things you could do at this point? And I have never walked out of those rooms not being inspired to make more games, finding ways to make my games better, or being more encouraged that people are making new, innovative, novel games that are full of their own passion and spirit and heart.
Yeah, and I think one of the magical things about Unpub is the fact that people can come in and play these games that will be published someday. Mm-hmm. So you get the first look at them.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people skip over that or don't know mm-hmm. that it's available, and I do think that it's like super important for people to realize that it is there.
And I will say, sorry to interrupt, but I will say there's maybe no bigger flex in the board game community than when a game is published and it is popular to be able to say, yeah, I played that 4 years ago, back when it was just pieces of cut out cardboard,
And I was kind of surprised at how many people use that as a resource. So many designers use it as like a jumping off point mm-hmm. because, like you said, it is so hard to get groups together to play test mm-hmm. stuff. I remember back in 2019, Emerson Matsuchi was here, and we were sitting at Unpub. We were doing some play testing on one of our games that we had designed, back when I was doing that. And Emerson walks in, and I'm like, wow, mm-hmm. okay, this is something. Like, everybody's using this as a resource, or mm-hmm. everybody can use this as a resource. And I think that makes it really magical.
I agree. And when I was in the Unpub room for the very first time, Ben Pinchback and Matt Riddle sat down and played Medium, and I was blown away because I was the only game I really knew of theirs at the time was Fleet, but I loved Fleet, and I knew them just from hearing them on podcast and stuff, and it just blew my mind that they were sitting just trying out my game just because they love games too, and they were actually sitting with a publisher, and serendipitously enough, that publisher ended up signing the game. But I say, if you are a designer, take advantage of those. Don't be precious with your designs. Don't feel like they need to be perfect and everything figured out, because people want to see them and people will be open to them.
So how does it feel to walk into a Target and see your games on the shelves?
It is insane. I still, it's so wild to think, because it does feel like kind of an insular community. I think we all have these experiences of talking about games that we love and people having these puzzled looks on their faces and be like, you and your weird games, But to have, for your game to be on the shelves in the place where you buy sheets and dog food and Fritos, it's unreal. There's actually, my game Medium is sold at the Meijer by me. And Meijer, if you don't know it, it's a supermarket where we get our groceries. And so I would be lying if I didn't tell you every time I went into that Meijer that I counted the copies of Medium on the shelf to see if I could tell if they had bought one. But it's so, I'm going to say humbling, which is a stupid word to say, but it's how I feel that like this was just a silly idea that I had in my head, and now it is out there in front of like thousands of people every day. And it's really something that it's beyond imagination.
So, one thing that I do have to talk to you about.
Oh, no.
And you didn't get this question either. We need to talk about your Dominion storage solution.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's hear it.
So you posted about this back in April.
Mm-hmm.
People can see it, and I will share a link once this does go out, because I saved that tweet. Uh-huh. I showed that to my friends in our room this morning, and they were like, what is he doing with that? It's just like a giant tub with a bunch of, just packaged Dominion cards, and then you pick 10 out, and that's what you play with?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my wife and I play 2-player Dominion all the time. We love it. We've been playing it for years, and we have base Dominion, and we have, I want to say, 6 expansions. And so if we're thinking about a game to play, I'm like, do you want to play Dominion? And then it turns into this huge chore where I have to bring up 6 boxes, and then we have to open 6 boxes. And then we would always play the way where you just draw the blue cards and pick, 10 different, Kingdom card decks to play with. And it just seemed like more of a chore than it needed to be, because we always played it randomly. And so what I decided to do instead, and I know this is sacrilege. If you look at this post, you look like you are throwing away the recycling. But I just took all of the Kingdom cards and put them in Ziploc bags. I have a bigger Ziploc bag that has the money cards and the points cards and everything. And so whenever we play Dominion, I just reach into the bin, pull out 10 of them, and that's what we play with. And it's so much easier to take out. It's so much easier to put away. I kept the boxes because I don't know, because I kept the boxes.
I do too.
But and I know that people will look at it and think that is ridiculous, but the cards are still laying flat against one another. They don't get messed up, and it gives you a fresh Dominion experience every time that you play. And I would love to think that the ratio of people who saw that and thought, this is bonkers, and people who thought oh, that's a decent idea. If that was 4-1, if I got 20% of people to consider that as a way to play Dominion, then I feel like I have done my job.
At first I was horrified. I was like, this man right here. But I'm kind of intrigued now.
Yeah.
I really am. I would love to play that way someday, just randomize it. Because I don't think I ever have. I've always played by the sets in the back.
Oh, is that right? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you end up with wildly different games of Dominion. I mean, sometimes we end up with games that have a bunch of attack cards, and it's kind of it's fun in that way, where you end up with a lot of curses or whatever it might be. We've played with games that ended up with just huge amounts of money, and you get all these big turns and combos. And it really makes you have to adjust to what came out, and because I did feel like when I would get a new expansion, I would fold those in a little bit more, but I love just finding out and seeing what the game gives us and then responding to it. It keeps the game fresh.
So I think one of the things I do want to go home and do within the next couple months is play just a random game of
Try it that
Dominion
way, yeah.
and try it. Yeah.
You know, Arwen, they come with those cards with the blue border on the back. That's how we
randomizers?
used to do it. We would just shuffle them and then just deal at 10. But then still, it's like you would shuffle them, you would deal at 10. You're like, oh, okay, this one's in Seaside.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's in Prosperity. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got like this, and maybe I should post this too, but I've got this big, like, giant Pelican case that I use, and I've just slotted everything
Oh,
in.
yeah. I see a lot of people get like the Hobby Lobby wooden art box, and they'll do them that way. But
Yeah.
I am not a person who can like do arts and crafts stuff.
No, the more that I'm thinking about it, the more that it's kind of starting to make sense.
Report back.
Yeah, I'm going to let you know. So you also have a day job outside of board game design. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's funny. People ask that question more than you would think, and I don't know if it's because people have this this idea of board game design as being a lucrative job, and I'm sure for Stefan Feld and Kiesling and Kramer, it maybe is. But I think for most of us, you know, I make games because I like to make games. I mean, they do bring in, I mean, I don't mind talking about money, but like they do bring in a lot of money. But I have a day job that I've had for 13 years and that I will continue to have, you know, when the next 3 or 4 games come out. You know, it's, I mean, I'm not going to say it's no money, but it's not what you live on. And I don't want to say that to make aspiring game designers feel like this isn't worth it because, you know, I'm going to put on all this time and energy into something and not get anything in return, because that's not true. You're not going to get a lot of money in return, but I think that if the only reason to do something is because you enjoy doing it. And I'll tell you, you know, I was an English major in college. I was always a big reader, and I always thought that creatively what I would do would be right. I thought I'd write a novel one day. I thought I would write all these short stories or whatever. And I still, until very recently, thought I would still be able to do that. But the thing was, I felt like I really loved having written something. I didn't really love writing something. Like the experience of writing something was painful, and it was difficult. And it's like, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to lock the door and I'm not going to emerge till I've written, you know, 500 words. But board game design is something that I feel like I actually enjoy the problem solving and the figuring out, and like having a wisp of an idea, be like, how much work would it take to turn that into something I could put in front of people and try out? And I think that, you know, designing board games needs to be like its own enterprise. And also I think that it has opened the door to, like I talked about earlier, like we talk about all the time, this community of people who love this stuff as much as I do. But I am only able to do this and go to these conventions and make this stuff because I work every single day, and I work at a marketing and branding company, and I'm a copywriter, creative director there, and I write every day for my job. And it's being able to have that balance. And I'll tell you, if you have some success with board game design, like at least personally, like your stresses at your day job, they don't seem as bad because you feel like you're not really the thing that you are. You think, well, I'm actually a board game designer, but I do this too. So like, you know, during the weekend or when you're like a week away, looking at the Slack messages from work and you just laugh at them. It's like, these are not my concerns. I need to figure out how to make the lines move quicker in my, you know, amusement park game. That's what I'm worried about, you know?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you brought up that I do want to touch on is having that passion. You need to do it for the passion of, I want to do this for me. I want to do this for my community. I want to, you know, bring this out because it's something that I want to do. It's not necessarily something that's going to make me rich and famous and get me a bunch of cars and stuff. And that's one thing that I do for the podcast is it's very much the same. Like I might get some review copies out of it. And, you know, I've certainly met a ton of people doing it, but it's for me, it's for the people that listen.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of an important note for people to kind of understand.
Oh, I agree. I think board game content creators and board game designers are very similar in terms of like being willing to make things that sometimes go nowhere, to try something that doesn't work, and to have a really small audience of people who really care about what you do, and a huge audience who will never ever learn about what you do, and not to have that expectation of, because I think there are definitely people who get into board game design thinking that they are, going to design the next SDJ winning game, and maybe they will. But there are thousands of us who design these little games that like a small group of people really like, and that needs to be enough. And the same for board game content creators. You see the huge channels and you see the influence they have, and there's only a couple of those for a reason. But there are a lot of folks who like have their audience who love everything that they do, and when I see Arwen at a convention, I'm like, I can't believe I'm actually seeing them, and I think it's very similar in terms of like needing to love doing it and getting out of it what makes sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's next for you?
Well, I mean, it's to hopefully keep making games. I do think that there is potential to make another or additional games in the Green Team Wins line. It's not a line because it's just one game, but I think the nature of the game makes you want to have new cards, new questions, and new things going out. And I would be lying if I told you I didn't have a Google Doc that had hundreds of more questions. And that's one of my favorite things to do is like when I'm having a conversation with people is that like, oh, that gives me an idea. And I'll write a Green Team Wins question on my phone. Actually, that one about sleeping on your side or sleeping on your back, that's not one that's in the game. That's one I just wrote down because someone mentioned they had gotten their hair in braids and they were like, well, I'm a side sleeper. I'm like, oh, I'm a back sleeper. So maybe that's a cool question. Yeah. I do have a game that'll be coming out at Gen Con. It is another party game, and I have another party game that is that's going to be out next summer, and I'm working on this other game that is not a party game that I can't really talk about. I can talk about a little bit, but it is it's a game about visiting like an Epcot Center type international exposition where you're like visiting the different countries and trying the food and taking photos and stuff like that. That I'm really starting to figure out, and I'm excited about. It's a game about waiting in line to get into those pavilions. I'm really excited about it, but it's a different kind of thinking than the party game. So we'll see if it goes anywhere or if anybody will ever see it on their shelf, but I'm really excited about it.
I am absolutely fascinated by that. as a amusement park junkie.
Oh, is that right?
Especially when I was a kid, we used to go and travel all over the place for amusement parks, and Cedar Point was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
We used to live up in Buffalo, so we'd make the travel down to Cedar Point because that was like the big to do.
Oh, it's the best.
They had all sorts of stuff there.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of really good amusement park games, and I wanted to do something a little different because I loved amusement parks too, and I love Disney World, and I'm saying that on the record, which is fine, but because I do. But
I do too.
But so many like amusement park games are about building an amusement park, and that makes sense. But I've never wanted to build an amusement park. I just want to go to them and see all this stuff. So I wanted to make a game about going to an Epcot Center type World Expo International exposition. And like doing all this stuff there. So it's a game about who can have the most fun in a day.
That's really, really cool. Looking forward to that.
Thanks.
So the last question that I ask everybody is, what is currently on your table?
Well, we recently got Earth. I don't know if you, again, this is me talking about the new hotness. But I love the theme. I love the little bits in it. But we have been playing that quite a bit. So that's been one that we have really enjoyed. Oh, a game that I got last year at Origins that I really like is called A Gift of Tulips.
Yes.
That we play very much. That I wish that game got a little bit more attention because it's a really fun game. It's a fun game for just 2 or 3 people, and I've played it with whatever the max player count is, whether it's 6 or 7. But it's a game about a tulip festival, and you are collecting and trading and selling tulips, and it's really fun. You will have a couple of cards, and you have to either gift one or keep one or put one into the market. And I think that idea of one of the things you have to do is give someone else a card that will benefit them is such a nice feature in a game. Very few games are about giving gifts for other players that are going to benefit them. So love Gift of Tulips.
People sleep on Weird Giraffe games.
It's true.
It's wild. I had a conversation with Carla, the owner of Weird Giraffe, this weekend, and it was supposed to be a media, conversation and that. So here's our new stuff, and a lot of those go, okay, you just have the conversation, and it's like, okay, yep, that's what you got. We were half an hour deep before we even got into discussing what she was doing. She was like, do you actually want to talk about games? I'm like, no, this is far more fascinating. I love this. So yeah, definitely one of my favorites as well, within the past year. Really fascinating mechanic.
Yeah, good. And really pretty game. I love the backs of the cards. Yes. If you get a chance, pick it up.
Very cool aesthetic. Well, Nathan, thank you so much.
This was an absolute dream.
Time. I appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you on socials?
Oh, on social media, I'm Stormchaser Game on Twitter because of the length of your name can be. And that's where I mostly post is on Twitter, as much as I have to hold my nose and do it. But it's where all the board game people are.
Yeah.
And I'm on Instagram at Stormchaser Games, at Stormchaser Games, yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Thanks. And I think that's going to do it for us today. If you want to know more about Cardboard Time, you can go to the website at cardboardtime.com. Our Instagram and Twitter is at cardboard_time. I am also on Blue Sky at Cardboard Time, and there's no underscore in that. Very excited to be on Blue Sky. Wonderful community so far and really liking it. Quite a bit. So if you are on Blue Sky, make sure to follow us on there. And any questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics, please email cardboardtime@gmail.com. And as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you around the table in 2 weeks for another episode of Cardboard Time.